Hello.
Hi, Melita. Are you showing I'm letting people in here. I have to talk and chew gum at the same time. Are you showing a PowerPoint?
I would like to, yes.
Yeah, okay, I'm going to make you a host.
Thank you.
Second, or a co-host. Things are keep popping as people come in, so it might take me a minute or two.
No worries.
To do that. Oh, come on, no, do that. Okay. Target. It's so much fun. Okay, I don't want that. Where'd you go now? There you are. Okay, you go there. Jesse, are you going to show a PowerPoint?
No, I don't plan to.
Okay. Right. I'm watching this thing bounce all over the place. So, and I saw somebody else. Susan, no, not yet. Okay.
Hello.
Hi, everybody else. We were shoveling our dinner, so I got on later than I was hoping.
Well, at least you're well fed. That's important.
Definitely well fed.
There was an article today I have not read yet, but talks about the etiquette of eating on Zoom.
Oh, yes.
We have a whole new world of words to memorize. No.
Yeah, so we can go ahead and join with
Video.
Talking to your doctor. So help heal your skin from within.
Sorry, it's not muted. We'll see if this works.
Hi, Deborah.
Hey. I got Jupe
Is that
here
Jupe?
too.
Is that Jupe? Hi, Jupe.
It is. Hi, Diana. How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Good, good.
Are you settled in your new house and everything now?
We are doing really good.
No.
I'll turn that light on.
Yeah. We're kind of dark here.
There
There
we
you
go.
go. Hi.
Hi, Joyce.
Hi there. How are you? Good to see you, Deborah. And
Thank
you too,
you.
Jim.
Hi, Joyce.
Hi.
Hey, Joyce. I just
Hi.
seems like
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Let's turn it to the gallery view.
Oh, okay. Tell me how.
Hello.
Hey, Judy.
Hi, Judy.
How do you do that?
Well, let's get into it. Yeah, let's do it.
Oh, right here. Yeah, yeah.
I have to get my right glasses on.
Up here. Okay. And let's put it full screen.
Hi, Mary Beth. Can you hear me yet?
I can, yes.
Okay.
Hello.
Are you going to show a PowerPoint?
I am.
All right. I'm going to make you a co-host.
Okay.
And I don't think we have Christine in yet, do we? I didn't see her.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Looks like a good group, though.
Very nice. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Joyce, where are you still in Arizona?
No, I just got back.
Oh,
Yeah.
good for you. Well, you got some warm weather before we get snow, I guess.
As soon as I left, it was like 85 degrees, and it was mainly in the 60s. Well, some 70s, but
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was nice. And we've had beautiful weather here. I can't.
It's going.
All right. Over to you, Miss Jane.
So hello, everybody, and welcome to this presentation by the League of Women Voters of Larimer County and our healthcare team and friends. So nice to be with you. I'm Jane Hamburger. I am spokesperson for this league, and I just want to tell you a little bit about us and how we operate before we get started. First of all, our full name is the League of Women Voters of Larimer County, not for women only. So for you men out there who may be interested in joining, we'd love to have you. And there's certainly plenty of work to do. Our league is nonpartisan, which means that we do not take sides with candidates or parties. That does not mean we don't take positions after we have studied them carefully and to see how this goes along with other league positions. And just by way of example, two things that are coming up this week that we are doing in a nonpartisan manner. Both happen on Wednesday with our voter service team that you are invited to participate in. At 1 o'clock, we're reaching out to join with the library, Poudre Library System. And it's going to be on ballot issues for Fort Collins. So if you would like to hear about, this is part of our educational program in a nonpartisan way, we'll try to present a balanced and accurate portrayal of the at least 7 ballot issues that are going to be on the Fort Collins ballot in April, and you can register through the Poudre Library System. And then later that evening on Wednesday at 7 o'clock, we will have a virtual candidates forum for the city of Fort Collins, their mayor, and those council members that are up for election. And this will be giving a balanced chance for each of the candidates to give their views and where they stand. And they'll also be recording it on the Fort Collins and League of Women Voters website. You can join in, don't need to register, but you can join in at the Fort Collins TV cable channel 14 and 881. So those are just 2 things that we're doing, again, educational and in a nonpartisan way. But tonight is about the healthcare, and the title of the show says Our Healthcare, Behavioral Health, and 2020 Stresses. Goodness knows we have a bunch of them. I was interested whenever I was reading some about the behavioral health that back in the late 70s, throughout the 80s, a well-respected American psychiatrist, Dr. William Glasser, said, all we ever do is behave. And when you look at it that way, it certainly gives a lot to study. And that's what we're going to do tonight in a 2020-21 look at things. Certainly things like telehealth we'll hear about, and how it's designed to relieve some of the stresses that they didn't have back in the 80s. And looking forward to tonight. And thanks the healthcare team for putting this together, and the people that you've reached out to, the authorities and the factual people that are there. So let me give this back to Sue.
Thank you, Jane. Before I jump in, I have noticed Ann Hall. I see your hand raised, and I just want to know if you need some help of some sort before we get going. And you're on mute if you're speaking. If you do need support, go ahead and use the chats. Oh, I see you came off mute.
Oh, that was an accident, Sue. I'm fine. I just am going from my computer to my iPad. So that's
okay.
My challenge.
That's
okay. Sorry about that.
Sue, I did see something coming in on the chat from Ann Thompson that I think would be worth adding to the nonpartisan support that we give to issues and ballot issues and candidates. And that's our vote411.org site. You know, they used to talk about those little booklets that the League of Women Voters put out that gave so much information. This is sort of the booklet in 2024, vote411.org.
Wonderful. Thank you, Anne, and thank you, Jane. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for spending your evening with us. The behavioral healthcare is a topic that isn't always talked about as much as primary healthcare, and so excited to have you with us tonight. And we know that both mental health and substance use has been an even bigger issue during this interesting time we've been in, especially during 2020. As I'm sure you've seen, the polls nationally show that nearly half of adults in the US report that their mental health has been significantly negatively impacted due to worries and stress around the virus and things like economic impacts. We know that substance use has increased during the pandemic. Certainly communities of color are disproportionately impacted. And so it's a timely topic. And I do want to give a specific shout out as Diana Dwyer and Joyce Devaney and I planned this panel. We got some good consultation and partnership from Caroline Bunn. So thank you, Caroline, for your advice and guidance as we put this together. And she helped us find 4 fantastic panelists as we were searching the community. And, you know, we hear a lot about healthcare heroes during these times. And certainly we want to thank each of our panelists for being healthcare heroes during these difficult times. Behavioral healthcare has been an important area of focus. And so we appreciate what you do for our community and for being with us tonight. So what I'd like to do is go ahead and introduce each of our 4 speakers by sharing their bios. And we'll take it from there. And so I'll go in the order of the presenters. So welcome to Dr. Mary Beth Regali Euler, who is the child and adolescent, and you can give a little wave. Thank you, Mary Beth. Child and adolescent psychologist for the Health District of Northern Larimer County and for the Child Adolescent Young Adult Connection Program. In this role, she provides treatment recommendations to primary care offices and school staff. She also conducts psychological evaluations of children so that they receive more accurate treatment. She received her doctorate from Arizona State University and completed a postdoc residency at the University of California, San Diego. She's earned a master's degree in counseling from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And her clinical interests include working with the underserved populations, culturally sensitive approaches to therapy and psychological testing, and child and adolescent mental health. So welcome, Dr. Regali Euler. Our second panelist is Melita Quanse, and hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Melita. Yeah, nice wave there, thank you. She is a bilingual Spanish and English couple and family therapist. Melita serves as La Cocina's Director of Forensic Services. As you may know, La Cocina is a Latinx founded, Latinx serving, and Latinx led nonprofit organization that provides no-cost mental health and health equity support services in Larimer County. Melita holds a master's degree in marriage and family therapy from the Ruckert Hartman College for Health Professionals at Regis University. And in her role at La Cocina, she provides forensic mental health assessments for asylum seekers, victims of torture or human trafficking, hardship visas and U visas, as well as couple and family therapy. Melita has been a passionate advocate for the Latinx human rights and immigration justice, especially since spending a semester living on and studying the border between the US and Mexico. She specializes in trauma, immigration trauma, intersectionality, and refugee mental health. So welcome, Melita. Our third panelist is Jessie Boyd. Jessie is on the clinical team lead for Summit Stone Health Partners as the co-response program. And this is a program that my suspicion from some conversations is not everyone in the community is aware of. So I'm excited to hear more about it. It's a partnership with the Loveland Police Department. And he's part of the Larimer Interagency Network of Co-Responders. And this is partnering with several local law enforcement agencies to provide behavioral health support for the community during police contact. Jesse is a licensed professional counselor and a national certified counselor with a Master's of Art degree. Welcome, Jesse. And our fourth panelist is Christine McHugh. Christine is a peer specialist program supervisor at Summit Stone Health Partners. She's a certified addiction specialist and has gained a wealth of knowledge through life experiences and through her own journey through the criminal justice system, addiction, and recovery. Her work is driven by the resiliency she found in herself and the resiliency that lives in all of us, as she says. So welcome, Christine. Pretty, as I'm reading those, pretty remarkable people that we have in our community, and thank you for being here tonight. The format we're going to use for tonight is each presenter will have about 15 minutes to share, provide their presentation, and immediately following the presentation, we're going to do some brief Q&A. If you have questions as we're going that you want to make sure you have a chance to ask, you can go ahead and enter them in the chat. We've got somebody monitoring the chat for us. When we get to the point of the Q&A section, you can either use the chat, or if you want to come off audio, you can use the digital hand raise, which you find, I believe, in the reactions area. Yeah, the raised hand there in the Zoom platform. And we'll get to as many questions as we can in that 5 minutes. And then we'll move to the next presenter. So, and if you want to give feedback to the presenters as they're going, that reactions button that I mentioned can be kind of fun. If you want to give a thumbs up or some love or applause, you can use that to digitally give some reactions. And Melita's already given us a demonstration there. So let's go ahead and jump in here, and we'll go ahead and start with Dr. Regali Euler. And it's our understanding that you, like so many behavioral healthcare providers, had to transform the way you provide services kind of overnight last spring, and do it all while you're balancing family at home. So over to you, Mary Beth.
Well, thank you so much. I'm honored to be part of this panel. What amazing folks do I get to present with tonight? So thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Let's see here. All right, can folks see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see here. I'm going to try to, can you still see my presentation?
We can see your presentation. We can see the slides on the left.
Okay.
My screen.
How does that look?
Perfect.
Perfect, great. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. My talk really spans a couple different areas. I think it's important to first give a picture of just what mental health for children and families was looking like in our community before March of 2020, and then what we are anticipating COVID kind of did in terms of changing mental health needs, and also talking about what my program is about and my own experience in being a full-time working psychologist and helping teach my child at home at the same time. So the first thing I wanted to let you all know about is the program that I work for. So you may have heard of the Health District of Northern Larimer County. This is a program, this is an organization that serves Northern Larimer County. The whole organization looks to bridge the gap for health needs in our community. So every so often, there's a community-wide survey looking at what are the needs in our communities, and based on those needs, we develop programming. So for instance, we have a dental program that's low cost for folks. We help individuals get connected with insurance, and we have a huge need for mental health in our community. And so the Connections program is bridging that gap. So we have an adult team and a child, adolescent, young adult connections team, and that's the team I'm part of. And really our aim is to provide assessment for families to figure out what's going on with their child or themselves in terms of mental health and what their needs are in our community. Oftentimes today, Google can almost be too much information where you're not sure where to start, or maybe you have started with some mental health resources, but they weren't the right fit, or everyone you call is full. And so Connections is there to kind of sort out those issues and help you get connected to where you need to go. The Child and Adolescent Program also offers some direct services such as psychiatry and psychological testing, and psychological testing is my role. So as I mentioned, I think it's important that we just have an understanding of where mental health was for children before COVID. And so before COVID even started, we had 1 in 5 teens met criteria for a mental health disorder. And over the lifetime, statistics show that 50% of us will have a diagnosable mental illness at some point in time. So that means that either one of us have had that experience or someone close to us has had that experience. And so we already knew that there was a high need for children. And we also know from statistics and research that suicidal thinking, really significant depression, anxiety has just been on the rise over the past few decades. We also know that Colorado suicide rates are among the highest in the country for youth ages 10 to 24. I don't want to get too much into ACEs. If you are familiar with it, it stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. There was some fantastic research that came out looking at 17,000 families in San Diego and experiences in an individual's life, such as emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, food insecurity, and measuring those individuals who've experienced those traumatic events or adverse experiences and what are the health effects for adulthood. And so the research shows that the more adverse experiences that one has, there's a higher risk for a multitude of health concerns, including things from heart attacks to depression, unemployment, lower educational attainment, and diabetes. So a whole host of factors that can stem from those early childhood experiences. And so I think for us, when we talk about COVID, we can consider that potentially an adverse childhood experience for some individuals. Losing a family member, having a parent lose a job, having to maybe move because of an economic impact. So there's a lot of stressors and experiences that kind of run the gamut for families today. And so I think that we need to kind of keep that in mind related to what's the short-term impact of COVID-19, but also what is the long-term impact for individuals. In terms of research related to mental health with COVID-19, there has been research that has shown that there's been an increase in mental health visits to the emergency room over 2020, while non-mental health related and non-COVID reasons for visiting the emergency department have actually decreased. And anecdotally, this is quite accurate to what we've seen at the kayak program and what I know Mountain Crest and inpatient hospital services have seen is that there's just a high acuity rate or really severe symptoms of depression, self-harm, anxiety in children and teens. And we're seeing these effects for younger and younger children. And of course, we know that the factors contributing to these mental health difficulties include things like uncertainty about the future, anxiety, worrying about financial stability, social isolation, and I think that there is also a variety in terms of our community. Some folks have extended family, they've got their village, and then there are families who are very much isolated during this time, whether it be because they are medically compromised or they just don't have the community set up yet. And then of course, parental and family stressors. UCLA has even come up with a specific psychological screener related to COVID-19 to assess for children and teens who actually meet criteria for PTSD related to COVID-19. So again, thinking about if a child or teen has seen someone in their family or someone close to them that's gotten very sick, been in the hospital, even died from COVID. And then of course, in our 24-hour news cycle, kind of being bombarded by the mortality rates, how many people are testing positive every day. It's hard to escape a lot of that. And so when you think about a trauma event, sometimes we think about a car accident or a traumatic event, but with COVID-19, it's really continuing today. We're still having the effects of it, and it's an ongoing experience for our world and our community. So I think one thing that's important to keep in mind is that children in particular are incredibly resilient, and at the same time, children do best with routine, consistency, and feeling safe. And of course, adults today aren't having any of that, or I'm hoping that we're getting closer to that. But I know in March of last year, just seeing all of a sudden, you know, the teachers are saying, make sure you bring your books home from spring break because we might not be coming back. That's a huge change in terms of families and children who are having to adjust. And I think that anecdotally, just as a parent, having to figure out platforms of remote learning, last year, my daughter was a kindergartner, so she couldn't exactly go on her laptop and figure out how to navigate and what is the chat box and what's the space bar. So it's a whole new language that we were expecting the littles to really be able to figure out. And then for adults, trying to figure out, well, what is the password to get into Google Meets, or is your meeting on Zoom? What do we need to do today? So it was a steep learning curve, I think, for a lot of families. We also know that children who had mental health concerns or were more vulnerable to mental health issues really rely on school staff for support. We really think about schools as a safety net for our families. Being able to access basic needs such as breakfast and lunch, being able to check in with a trusted adult, having access to a school counselor, school social worker, and for children with a 504 IEP plan, which is a formal legal document that allows for academic accommodations if a child has a disability or a mental health issue. It's incredibly difficult to implement those plans via remote learning when perhaps a plan is small group instruction because a child has dyslexia, or a reading specialist, or being able to take a test in a quiet room by themselves. Those things aren't necessarily possible when you're doing remote learning. And it would be amiss for me to not mention that, of course, there's a disproportionate impact in our community related to these stressors. And so I think that for families who are already under a financial strain, that of course, COVID has exacerbated that. And then there's adults who took positions or who have positions where they are essential workers in the community, but were unable to take a leave of absence from work. So individuals who work at the grocery store, who have other positions that they have to go to work, they can't stay at home to help their child with remote learning. Families with multiple children, I know that the schools often have experiences where older children are leaving their remote classroom because they have to go help a younger sibling because their parent is trying to focus on either another child or their own work. And then when you think about single parent homes, that's a whole, it's the stresses related to having to balance all of that is incredible. And families who are typically underserved in our community, so families who identify as Black, Indigenous, people of color, there is both health disparities related to infection rates and hospitalization rates and mortality rates related to COVID-19, but also economic disparities in terms of the proportion of individuals who are small business owners, for instance. So we know that certain families were also hit harder. Additionally, children with special needs, so children on the autism spectrum or children with past trauma, families without nearby extended family or social supports, and families who become ill with COVID-19. So we know that there's a disproportionate impact on families, and that obviously is something that's really important for us to keep in mind when we're talking about solutions and providing support. Now, when we talk about mental health generally, it's important to think about protective factors. As I said, children are incredibly resilient, and overall, I think in a lot of ways, we're able to manage all the changes that we had a lot better than adults because they are used to kind of having to be flexible, and their brains are just growing like gangbusters, and they can adapt to new environments and new challenges. And so there's a lot of resiliency that comes with children. And then we also know that protective factors such as having a safe, stable relationship with family members, and parent resiliency and parents getting the support they need, children emotional and social health, social connectedness, and socioeconomic advantages. So just an example from as working at Kayak, I have exposure to a lot of different families from all over Northern Larimer County. And I know that some families were able to hire a private tutor to do all of the remote learning for their child, whereas some families were worrying about the rent payment for the next month and had to leave children who were in first, second, third grade kind of on their own for the remote learning. And what a stark contrast in terms of the resources and a child's experience over the past year. And so when thinking about Kayak families and just what I've noticed in my work over the past year is that we've really seen a decrease in accessibility to those protective factors that we know are really important for keeping mental health issues at bay, such as community and social supports. When the thing that helps us cope best is to lean on somebody and to reach out for support, but that's actually not available to you because maybe everyone is struggling, and so it's hard to ask for support, or you assume that, I can't ask my friend because they're also struggling. But also just the logistics of physical distance and quarantine and not being able to have that connection. And then also mental health services in terms of financial access or literal access to services. Telehealth has been an amazing opportunity for families who haven't had access to mental health resources in the past. And at the same time, providing therapy to a 5-year-old on telehealth has a lot of challenges. Or teenagers. Some teenagers just have a really difficult time connecting with a therapist over a screen, which is kind of interesting because we don't really think about that with teenagers as they're so much more tech savvy. The idea that a stable and resilient parent is a protective factor when parents have been struggling as well over the past year with all of the factors that I spoke about earlier, and then school supports. I think that one thing that came out of this past year is just really hit home how it does truly take a village, not only to raise a child, and to provide intervention, but also identification. So we know that those who had already been diagnosed with a mental health issue, those symptoms are likely exacerbated over the past year. But for those who maybe did not have a mental health condition prior to 2020, we know that stress over a long period of time can actually lead to the onset of a mental health condition. And so when we're isolated, when we're at home, and parents are isolated and at home, where does that early identification happen? We know that a lot of children have been skipping the well visits with their pediatrician, which is usually an initial kind of funnel into mental health services. I know I'm getting close on time, so I want to kind of just go through really quickly that I think behavioral disruption and emotional regulation were things that we really saw a lot with families with younger children in elementary school. and parents kind of being expected to kind of do it all and hold it together. And those mismatched expectations and reality can actually cause more stress on somebody. With adolescents, we've seen an increase of police interaction with adolescents who've been abusing substances. Really difficult for families to hold boundaries and to ensure that a child is interacting with their school, because if a parent has to work or caregiver has to work, and they're just assuming that their child is online, or even if they know that the child is not engaging in school, how do you force a 16-year-old, 17-year-old to log on and do the work? And so we know that there's been an increase in that struggle that parents and children have. And I just have to mention that, as I already did, I guess, that I am also a parent of 2 little girls. And my oldest was in kindergarten when remote learning started. And I can't separate that part of my identity from the identity that I have as a psychologist. When the pandemic started, my role as a psychologist doing psychological testing was put on pause because I'm part of the care team in the community, which is mental health professionals that respond to the community in the event of an emergency. So I shifted from working on direct testing with children to doing shift work 7 days a week, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. as a crisis counselor for all ages. It was quite a difference, especially when my whole family was at home due to the pandemic. So I think for me, it was incredibly humbling and just really helped me have even more compassion for families, because I was living a lot of that as well. And so I think takeaways include teachers are superheroes, and so are parents. And I think that I hope that we as a community don't forget that moving forward, but also the care of parents is really important if we're going to talk about children's mental health. And when we're looking at this past year, I heard a quote about, we are all in the same storm, we just had different ships. And I thought that was just a brilliant way of talking about the intersectionality of resources and socioeconomic status, and how these challenges have hit families in different ways and communities in different ways. And in terms of, I just encourage folks to reach out to their local community, their neighborhood school, local food bank, and Connections. So Connections is my program, and please, I would encourage anyone to access our services and give us a call. And I'm going to try to stop sharing here. Let's see. There we go. I think that's it. Any questions?
Oh, I see some applause.
Thank you.
Some love, yeah. A lot of great information.
Great. Well, thank you for having me.
I have a question. This is Diane. I have a question. How do you tell the difference between a child who's really under stress and one that's just acting out because they're 12 or 13, the normal behavior?
That's a great question. So what's developmentally appropriate and what maybe is emerging mental health issue that needs to be addressed in a more professional manner? I always suggest that folks just reach out to their pediatrician, or you could call Connections. That's exactly what we're there for, because so much of it could be related to developmental milestones that children and teens have. And even if it is developmentally expected, that doesn't necessarily mean that some additional support couldn't be helpful. And so, yeah, so books or strategies, validation, all of those things are so important for parents to feel like they can.
Well, I just, heard like my entire life is over.
Yeah.
now at 13, you know, and I don't know if that's just being 13 or
Yeah.
stress from COVID.
Yeah. Yeah. And it could be both. I think that when, as a mental health professional, when we're looking at trying to distinguish, are these things persistent for that person? Is their functioning impacted? Are they no longer engaging in school, engaging at home? Are there other symptoms that are showing up? And again, that's something that I think a pediatrician or a counselor can kind of help you figure out those pieces, because it's hard. I get that question a lot, even like, is this just a boy being a boy? I don't know. I've got 3 girls and now I have a 5-year-old boy and it's completely different.
Yeah.
So I think those are questions we get a lot.
Okay, thank you. It was excellent presentation. It's very good.
Thank you.
That's great. Mary Beth, this is Joyce. Janet Seeley is asking on chat if you have a waiting list on Kayak, and I would add, have you seen a big increase in the last year of clients needing service?
That's a great question. So we don't have a waiting list. Our entry point is to have a phone call with a master's level clinician who can provide some of that initial assessment, support, and direction. And then from there, we have child psychiatry and psychological testing, but oftentimes we're not trying to reinvent the wheel or duplicate services. So if we feel like a family is best served long-term at going to Summit Stone, then we're going to help them get to Summit Stone. Or if they have private insurance, we're getting them resources in the community. And so there's no wait list for those phone calls with our mental health professionals. And in terms of, what was the second question? Sorry.
Just if you've seen an increase in the last year.
I think that we have seen an increase. I think in the beginning, we really expected to have like huge numbers of people calling in. And what we realized is that it was steady, but I think people were really in survival mode. And I think that as time went on, as basic needs were maybe being met or the shock was kind of wearing off and the long-term impact is being realized, I think that we're seeing that impact come to fruition. So I think that right now we're incredibly busy, and I expect that we will be moving forward.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. We'll take one more question. I see Bill's got his hand raised, and then we'll continue. Bill.
Very early in your presentation, you listed the age span for children from 4 to 24, when actually in society and the legal system, we often assume that once a person's 18, that person is an adult. Is that 4 to 24 span based upon brain development, or what is the basis for that age span?
That's a great question. In terms of brain development, you're spot on, Bill, because our frontal lobe is not done until mid-20s. So you're exactly right on that. Our program really, we started based off of a grant that kind of set those ages. And for us as a program, we're looking at, has someone launched? So we're not the Kayak program is not suited for, let's say, the 22-year-old parent of children working full-time. They'd be a good candidate for an adult program. But the 22-year-old who is living at home, unable to function because of a mental health condition, can't get a job, isn't launched, they would be a good candidate for the Kayak program.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Great questions. Thanks for all the engagement and for a wonderful presentation. It's admirable how much you are focused on the needs of others and how to meet other people's needs. Well, your professional life took quite a twist in the middle of all of this and balancing kids at home. So thank you very much. And as you were speaking and you were talking about the disproportionate impacts, I was extra grateful that Melita is able to join us, and with your it sounds like your life's work as well as your current work focused on the disproportionate impact in some pretty significant areas. So welcome, Melita.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me and my cat. So first of all, I just want to say something that we don't celebrate a lot in the United States, but we celebrate a lot in Spanish-speaking countries, is today is the International Day of the Woman. So happy International Women's Day to all of you who are women, know women, love women out there. Feliz Día Internacional de la Mujer. It's a really exciting day. We usually get flowers when we're at the office in person and from our board and things like that. So those are things I'm definitely missing from being in person, for sure. So I'll tell you a little bit about La Cocina, and as I talk about our different programs, I will talk about how the community has been additionally adversely affected, all of the things that Mary Beth said, and then some. So we'll talk about all of that. So La Cocina, like was shared in my bio, is a Latinx founded, a Latinx serving, and Latinx led nonprofit organization serving the mental health needs and health equity needs in Larimer County. We've actually also recently expanded to Denver County, Eagle County, and Weld County. And whenever we return to offices, we'll open offices in different areas of Colorado. So it's very exciting. So somos apoyo, aliento, y esperanza. So we're help, nurturing, and hope for the community. And who we are, here's a picture of many of us. This is in the background. You can see our weekly administrative Zoom meetings where we all hop on to talk to each other. And this is just a really great quote. There is no power for change greater than a community discovering what it cares about. And so that's what we've been working on. So our name, La Cocina, which if you know Spanish, you're like, why is this place called the kitchen? But our name comes from Dolores Huerta, who worked with Cesar Chavez, who worked with the migrant farm workers movement throughout California to get rights for labor and workers in migrant communities. And they often ended up meeting with people in the kitchen. And so Cesar Chavez would say, all revolutions begin in the kitchen, which is true because the kitchen is the warmest place of our home and it's where we come together to gather. And so that's the sensation that we want to create in the community when we're working with folks, that it's like we're sitting across your kitchen table from you, just having a conversation about life, but also starting a revolution. And so we believe mental health is for everyone. Evidently, that's revolutionary because our clients, so the majority of our clients are Spanish-speaking immigrants who don't have access to healthcare. So for various reasons, are undocumented or work at jobs where they don't have health insurance, have no other access to get mental health support or like the assessments that Kayak does. And so when we do have a waiting list, we finally went through all of our waiting lists from June of 2020. We finally got folks in from that. So we're still working on the rest of 2020 to try and get all of our folks seen by therapists who are majority bilingual and bicultural therapists. And so if folks do have Medicaid or some other form of insurance help, we are often sending them to the other folks who are here. So we'll send them to Mary Beth to get assessed at Kayak, or we'll send them to Summit Stone for services that Summit Stone provides in Spanish or bilingually as well. So one of our goals is dismantling systems of oppression that keep Brown people down. And so when you're talking about how COVID-19 has adversely affected the Latinx community, we're additionally looking at things like folks are undocumented, so they don't have access to the government services like the stimulus payment. Also, most of our families are what's considered essential workers. So agricultural workers, grocery store workers, restaurant workers. They don't have the choice, hotel workers, they don't have the choice or the opportunity to stay home with their children while their children are home from school. They can't work from home. Also, the majority of our community doesn't have savings, right? 3 months worth of savings to back you up should you lose a job. So at the beginning of COVID, we went from being a mental health agency to holy cow, like half of our clients just lost their jobs in the restaurant industry because all the restaurants closed and they can't pay rent and they can't buy groceries. And what are we going to do? And so we did things like deliver groceries to people's front doors. We worked with other organizations in Fort Collins like Isaac and Fuerza Latina to provide a $300 one-time payment that families could anonymously apply for and get it either cash or check to help them pay rent or pay for their utilities. We worked with the city of Fort Collins to help with utility payments, Catholic Charities, Neighbor to Neighbor, a number of organizations. One of the most beautiful things for me that has come out of COVID is that all of the BIPOC, so Black, Indigenous, people of color organizations in Fort Collins, we've banded together and we've been meeting and we've been talking to each other and we've been helping each other. And that's been a really beautiful result of a really difficult time. So for example, like Leo Escalante, who works for the city, was able to get the food bank to start delivering food to people's home instead of people having to come to the food bank to get food, those sorts of things. All of that is outside of mental health. However, if you can't eat and you can't pay your rent, your kids are home doing school from home, but you have to go to work, your mental health gets pushed to the back burner, to the back burner, to the back burner. And so we've seen things like an increase in domestic violence, increases in substance use, increases in families dividing up, not living together, all kinds of things, right? If you add on top of that the stress of immigration and ambiguous immigration status, which means you're undocumented or DACA got canceled and then DACA got reinstated. We're going to accept asylum seekers from these countries, but not these countries. We're gonna, prevent people from getting any kind of citizenship if they've ever accessed government services. These are all things that the Trump administration put into place over the past 4 years that were adding to the stress and are still adding to the stress. So we still have people saying, can we go get the vaccine? Like, is that going to prevent us from ever becoming a citizen because that's a government service and we've accessed that? And so now we're working on vaccine equity too, which is again outside of mental health, but we're a trusted agency in our community, and so we're doing the best that we can to respond to the current needs with no increase in funding in order to do that. So I'll tell you a little bit about our programs right now. So Mil Días de Amor, or 1,000 Days of Love, is our program for kiddos who are up to 6 years old. We're doing so many cool things in this program right now. We're working with a new program called Favas, which is for women who are providing childcare in their homes for their neighbors while their neighbors are working. We also are starting this program that I helped write and I'm so excited about, but I don't get to work in it at all, called Cultura Cura Belli, where we're going to be working with pregnant women who have a history of substance use in themselves or in their families, providing them with therapy and art therapy. And then we're going to do belly casting. And the whole family is going to like put their hopes and their dreams for the baby on the belly cast. And we are working with a BIPOC owned art gallery in Denver to display the belly cast. It's a really cool program. And then we have prenatal, perinatal, and postpartum mental health care, clinical services for children 0 to 6 years old, CPP or child parent psychotherapy, which is a trauma informed and Latinx way of looking at trauma and how it affects the relationship between the parent and the child. Circle of Security, which is a really cool group about developing attachment between parents and children. We've been able to offer Circle of Security on Zoom, which has been really cool. We had someone from Guatemala participate, which is just really amazing because it's not a therapy group, so other people could pop on who are outside of Colorado. But we've had people from the mountains, people from Denver, people from Fort Collins, like all getting together. And we usually do this group in Spanish. During COVID, we had enough interest that we also offered our first Circle of Security program in English to Latinx families who don't speak Spanish, which is a large part of the population. So that was really neat. And then we do some bilingual neurodevelopment assessment, and we're hoping to do that more, especially for families that don't have Medicaid and don't have access to things like kayak. But we're often calling Mary Beth, can you help? And she's often saying yes, so thank you, Mary Beth. And then we have La Cocina 6+, so this is our teens and adult programming, clinical services for children and youth who are 6 and over, adult services, and 2 particular groups I want to mention. Tu Pausa is our dialectical behavioral therapy or mindfulness-based group that we've often done with parents. And it's so incredible. It's one of my favorite things. Because of COVID, again, like we've offered this over Zoom and we've been able to spread it out to more parts of Colorado, which has been really beautiful, and increase this kind of connectivity in the Latinx communities in different parts of our state. To be like, oh, you know, there's more of us and here's our community and we're connected and we're all talking about the same thing. And then El Grupo is our teen group, which specializes in helping teens navigate this sort of bicultural life that they're living. So they have one foot in their home, in their culture of their parents' home country, wherever that country is. And then they have another foot in the culture of Fort Collins and the United States. And so they're navigating all kinds of things around independence, substance use, religion, things that their parents might have different views on and theories about because of their country of origin, teachings. And then you have kids who are growing up here. And so that group is really special. And that's led by bicultural adults now who are therapists who have lived through this same experience of trying to navigate both cultures. So a particularly impactful story for me that came out of this group was one of our teens. She's the only documented member of her family. So she's an older sister and both of her parents who are undocumented and don't have papers, don't have permission to be here, don't have health insurance, don't have anything. And she ended up contracting COVID at school and bringing it home, and her entire family got sick. And so here's this teenager who already is feeling this pressure and this guilt of having like rights in this country that the rest of her family doesn't have. And then she gave them COVID. And luckily, everyone in the family was fine. No one had to be hospitalized. They all were able to just stay home and rest and heal, but like her parents weren't able to work during that time. And she carried that stress, right? That's this whole other level of stress that other teenagers aren't feeling. What if my parents have to go to the hospital? What if they miss work and we don't have enough money to pay our rent? What if? So we were able to support the family through that process, and still continue to work with the teenager who continues to have some suicidal ideation and some anxiety and depression issues that have been exacerbated by coronavirus, but were pre-existing before that. And then my program is called Mind Over Border. And so I do a lot of the forensic work. So that's anything where the law and mental health intersect. So anything that has had, an arrest, a police case, I'll do an assessment of the psychological and mental health impacts of those trauma experiences on the individual and maybe why they've acted out in the ways that they have that have led to the arrest or the interaction with law enforcement or people who are in active deportation proceedings. So prior to COVID, I would go to the GO detention center. I actually live in Denver, so I would drive up to Fort Collins 4 days a week to work. And then the GO detention center is like 1.6 miles from my house. And so I would go there and I would sit with folks who are currently detained and do these assessments, which were submitted as part of their legal case to try and help them get asylum or any of the other visas that I mentioned. So there's lots of different types of visas that you can get as an immigrant that give you permission or papers, right, to be in the United States. And so we had one particular person who I've been working with for a couple of years. And she worked in a restaurant. She lost her job because the restaurants weren't open. She had previously struggled with substance use. After losing her job, started using substances again. We were able to get her connected with Summit Stone and some other supports in the community. She's now sober again, which is fantastic. And all of a sudden, miraculously, in the mail in December, she received her VAWA visa. So she's been in the United States since she was 5 years old. She doesn't qualify for DACA. And she just got it in the mail. Like none of us knew that this was happening, but it just like came in the mail. And so for the first time in her entire life, she doesn't have to depend on a man to possibly give her like legal rights to be in this country or to look for, because she was married before and suffered domestic violence in that marriage and had to get divorced. And so this freedom that she's feeling and this pressure that has been like lifted off of her shoulders has been really incredible to see and experience. And to watch, her bloom and blossom and feel safe and like she can express her opinion and participate. Am I going over my time, Sue?
We're getting close here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'm almost done. So, okay. So we also have the Respiro program, which means respite. And so we provide childcare during our groups, which we've had to switch to childcare over Zoom while we're doing groups over Zoom. And our team has been amazing. and kids end up interacting with them and playing with them by the end. And then our head of our Respiro program started this really amazing support system called Florecer, which means to bloom. And we've been providing peer mentors and tutors to our kids who are at home learning, and their parents like have no idea how to teach math the way we're teaching it now. I have no idea how to teach my 11-year-old math the way we're teaching it now. And so that program has been really amazing. So yeah, that's La Cocina. That's some of the ways that we've adapted. You know, like Mary Beth said too, like reinventing mental health over telehealth, and doing clinical assessments over the phone or on Zoom. Yeah, so our healing cannot wait, right, until the structures acquiesce, are dismantled, or come undone. We have to keep doing it right now, while we're also dismantling the structures. Thank you all so much for having me.
Wow. Whew. Thank you, Melita. Beautiful, beautiful presentation. What questions do we have? Why don't we start with one in the chat if we have anything there, Joyce?
Yeah, we had a question from Pat. It was the CCB program, Melita, that you talked about. That's fascinating. She was asking whether or not, I mean, to clarify exactly what that's about, was she was asking if you actually do a plastic cast of the woman's belly. And as a public health nurse who's worked with prenatals my whole career, this is fascinating. Kudos to you. I just think this is fabulous. So please do tell us more about that.
Yeah, so it's a plaster casting of breasts and belly. And then, so it's the actual like baby and the mom's body. And then we let it dry, and then you can paint it. And then we'll hang them up in the art gallery on display with book stories.
That's fabulous.
Oh, that is just so neat. Kudos. Absolutely. That's wonderful.
Do you accept volunteers that don't speak Spanish? Anne was asking that she'd like to help, but she doesn't speak Spanish.
We have had non-Spanish speaking volunteers, for example, like in the Florecer program or in the Respiro program, working with the kiddos, because sometimes the kiddos speak English. So yes, you do have to pass a background check to work with kiddos. But other than that, we don't, because I would say about 80% of our clientele is monolingual Spanish speaking. So we really need folks who speak Spanish.
Yeah.
Thank you. I see Kathy Wilson has your hand up.
Yeah.
I read today, I think in the Washington Post, that in the last 2 weeks, the number of children at the border has doubled. Are you gearing up for helping some of those children that come here, and how?
Yeah, we are. Yeah, so the number of children at the border hasn't doubled. They've all been waiting there since Trump passed the Remain in Mexico policy and refused to allow anyone to enter. So first you could enter as an adult, then you could enter as an adult with a child. Then we were only letting children enter. Then the border was closed completely. So the children who are coming without an adult are called unaccompanied minors. There is an immigration process to help them called Special Immigrant Juvenile Status. It takes about a year to complete, and it of course costs money. And so these kiddos are coming across the border with nothing. They don't have money. We already have about 50 unaccompanied minors in Poudre Valley School District in Fort Collins. And we're expecting to get a lot more. We're currently trying to develop strategies to meet that need with our other community partner organizations.
Yeah. Jeez.
Melita, this is Joyce. This isn't a question, but a comment for the audience, actually. You mentioned all these organizations, and you just did now, and the wonderful the collaboration and coordination between those. So kudos for that. But if folks are interested, I know that all of those organizations, Isaac, I don't know if people are even familiar with that, La Fuerza, and certainly Neighbor to Neighbor and so on, let us know, because we would be happy to send to you all the contact information, because they desperately need the very kind of thing that you're talking about, Melita, to deliver meals. And I know they're still doing that, paying rent. I just had a request from Isaac just recently on that. So please do let us know, and we can let the audience know how to get in touch with those organizations, including yours, by the way. La Cocina needs money too, so.
Yes, I will put our donate in the chat. Yes, and like one of the things that you're probably going to talk about at your next meeting when you're talking about what's before the city council is the Fort Collins Legal Defense Fund that La Cocina and Alianza Norco and the Colorado Immigrants' Rights Coalition have been asking for the city of Fort Collins to provide some money, for example, for these special immigrant juvenile status fees, filing fees for the kiddos who are already here, the kiddos who might be coming here. So we're getting support on that. It feels really positive. As you talk about it, remember me and all the things that I said. And if you have more questions, reach out.
Thanks for mentioning that. Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Melita. Wonderful, wonderful presentation, great stories. Yes, wonderful work you're doing. It's amazing how innovative you've been in the very evolving needs over the last year. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm 42, so I didn't grow up with a computer. You know, this is all, but luckily I have staff members who are 20 something.
Yeah. Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you. Thanks for the questions. And let's see, Jesse, I have to find you on my screen. Welcome to Jesse Boyd in the co-responder program. Curious about your experience in all of this, so welcome.
Yeah, thanks, folks. Thank you all for having me. I really appreciate it. Wonderful presentations. Really love to hear more about our community partners. Thank you all for organizing this. Yeah, so I might mention I'm a co-responder, so I'm a mental health professional employed by Summit Stone Health Partners. It's our local community mental health center in Larimer. So we primarily serve Medicaid clients for our outpatient services. We have a wide range of services provided through our agency, child and family, adult, outpatient counseling, case management, substance use treatment. And part of our program where we stemmed from, we started out as an extension essentially of our behavioral health urgent care, which is a crisis clinic in Fort Collins. And we started out as a mobile extension embedded out of the Loveland Police Department. And so since then it's grown pretty significantly, and we're in multiple different law enforcement agencies. We have 2 co-responders, myself and a woman named Sue Jones out of the Loveland Police Department. We have 2, actually 3. We have just hired a new person out of the Larimer County Sheriff's Office. We have a clinician with Estes Park Police Department, a case manager, and we're working on a peer specialist as well. So through grant funding and such, we were able to get quite a few different services involved. So I mean, essentially what we do, our model is to provide support for community contacts, more comprehensive care for community members when they've had contact with law enforcement for whatever reason it might be. We operate in a couple of different manners. We have a primary and a secondary response model. Ours out at the Loveland Police Department, we're sort of a hybrid. A primary response model means that you are riding directly with a law enforcement officer. So you're in the car with them your entire shift, and you're monitoring, keeping an eye out for any kind of behavioral health related call, and then going and providing whatever that sort of service and support might be. Our secondary model is a little bit different. We have our own van with a barrier in it, so we can transport as well. And we will monitor for calls. We're situated out of the bullpen of the police department. We'll monitor for calls on the radio, wait for dispatch to call us, wait for law enforcement to call us, and then we'll respond out to the scene. We might arrive at the same time with officers. I've beaten them there sometimes before, depending on where we're at. And we might be called to the scene later as well if they recognize, oh, there's some stress going on here. There's something else going on and we want to try to help. So that's how essentially we operate. we'll go out for anything. We're all about crisis, right? And crisis is subjective. All of us are going to have different ideas on what distress is. What might be traumatic for me might not be for you, vice versa. And so we really, it's about self-defined crisis, self-defined distress. If someone's struggling, going through a tough time, we want to be there and try to meet them where they're at. So, I mean, we respond out for anxiety, depression, trauma, grief, interpersonal relationship concerns, substance use, psychosis. We assess, we try to monitor for safety, imminent risk. That's going to be one of our main focus. We'll help de-escalate an emotional behavioral crisis in the moment, because that's what we specialize in, and that's not something that part of what we try to do is to relieve and enable law enforcement to go back out in the field about their other duties. So we'll provide emotional support, do brief therapeutic interventions. We'll coordinate care with community partners and do a ton of work behind the scenes as well to try to make sure whatever underlying issue there might be that could have contributed to that law enforcement contact, try to address it in some way. And so that's a big goal of our program. More comprehensive care, decrease unnecessary use of emergency services, whether it's 911, emergency departments, fire, EMS. Try to help meet whatever needs that person might have to avoid that overuse of those different emergency systems. And assess and provide support out in the field instead of the person having to go to the hospital, instead of that being the only recourse. We'll try to divert to our crisis clinic. We have a crisis stabilization unit as well, which is a short-term, low level of care where someone can go for up to 5 days, get if they're feeling unstable, get back on their feet, get maybe started on medications, get some more intensive services. So we do our best to avoid higher level of care placements, whatever it might be, at the hospital, and meet them where they're at. So, I mean, COVID's been a ride. It's been a huge impact on so many people. And I mean, the approach that we take is sort of a biopsychosocial approach, how biology, psychology, how we're processing things, and our social, how those aspects all contribute to our well-being. And there's been, as you've heard everyone else describing, there's been instability in all of those different areas, which has just contributed to distress in a variety of different forms. I mean, it's busy. Interesting. I tried to look back up. There's been some limitations with data processing, but I tried to look back up a couple things. Our contacts between my coworker Sue and I, our contacts out of the Loveland Police Department have been relatively stable, which I think since between December and March of 2020 and 2021, relatively consistent, which I think speaks to the fact that we've been at capacity and operating going pretty hard for a while. And I think one thing that I found interesting is that we've put in over just those couple of months between she and I an additional almost 45 hours of additional time spent with clients, so about a 15% increase, which really speaks to the complexity and acuity of the different people we've been seeing, how intricate some of these issues are and how many different spheres of our lives they touch. And additionally, I mean, one thing I noticed as well is since March of 2020, we've also had to ask for help from our behavioral health urgent care, have to ask for help from our other co-responders. And we had to refer out and ask for some support for about 140 different people since that time, and which shows about a 60% increase in contacts if we had not had to refer some of those folks out and ask for help elsewhere. So there's definitely been an increased impact I've seen in the community with general distress for a variety of different reasons. I mean, I ditto everything that all the other presenters have said. I mean, the housing, shelter, food, financial insecurity has been huge. When those basic needs, when they're not met, it makes it so much harder to address our mental well-being. You can't access that part. And I mean, I've had a personal experience with that. I have a family member who can't afford his home. We're gonna have to figure out a way to move him, across the country. It's I've seen a huge increase in that simple type of instability for those needs that we all have. Even things along the lines of bed availability in psychiatric facilities because of limitations related to COVID. There's not as many beds available because they might have to restrict the amount of people at the facilities. You know, I think one of the biggest things that I've found to be really impactful, and I've heard as themes as well in all my contacts with people, has been a lack of access to social supports. The things we socialization, going to the gym, movies, restaurants, concerts, sports, whatever it might be, it's not there. We don't have this ability to engage in them. And that extends out further as well to cultural, spiritual, personal rituals, celebrations, things that we all might have taken for granted before, not able to access those things. And I've heard a lot of folks expressing there's not as much to look forward to, which has really impacted people. Along those lines, access to our typical coping mechanisms. Like, we all have individualized ways of dealing with distress. And we might not have access to those things anymore. I like playing softball. I joined a softball team. I'd love to do that. That was a great way for me to decompress. Don't have access to that anymore. And people with a decreased ability to utilize whatever that typical coping strategy might be, you do see more reliance on more maladaptive methods of dealing with distress, substance use. I've definitely seen a huge increase in that. And that inability to manage more difficulty with managing our emotions, regulating our emotions with whatever skills we might use. I see a lot of folks with impaired distress tolerance, impaired frustration tolerance, more difficulty managing and tolerating those things, a huge increase in caregiver fatigue. I mean, we're all, because of the isolation, the quarantine, people that are caring for each other, when whatever way it might be, you're in this small area together, nonstop, without access to the things you usually utilize to deal with stress. And so you see a huge rise in clinically significant mental health symptoms, anxiety, paranoia, catastrophic thought processes, this fear of what's the worst is going to happen, hopelessness, right? Depression is compounded by isolation. And a lot of those thoughts that we do see as suicide, does have those themes, isolation and hopelessness. And so it's been really difficult for folks. We've seen through the police department, this is anecdotal, but we've seen, I believe, a significant amount of more verbal, physical disturbances, because people are just confined in those small spaces, and so it's really easy to butt heads. More intimate partner violence, substance use, particularly alcohol and methamphetamine. I feel like multiple referrals every single week are significantly exacerbated by substance use. And the difficulty with trauma. I mean, I met a family who had a pretty significant trauma history and partner violence. And the fact that they weren't able to stay at that home because that person knew where they were at, and they couldn't stay with a family member, their typical support systems that normally can access, because it's a very vulnerable population, the family members were. And so they can't stay with that person and put them at risk. And so it really took a lot of scrambling, trying to find something, coordinating with our community partners to figure out what's a viable solution here. How can we help? And you've seen there's a lot of barriers too. Some of the other presenters that touched on technology limitation. Not everyone has access to the internet or a phone. Simply don't. And a lot of times with decreased income, that financial instability, those extra expenditures are a little bit less likely. So internet might be one of the first things to go. One of the things I see quite a bit of truancy. So folks aren't going to school as much, just because I had a family that they really weren't technologically savvy, didn't have enough money to be able to pay for internet. And so the kid wasn't able to really go to school. It was a really difficult situation. They wanted to, just they couldn't figure it out. One of the things I know that Summit Stone has done a great job of trying to figure out some other options. There's a phone loaner program that we have, so we're able to try to help with telehealth options. If people don't have access, we want to try to avoid that barrier. And so there's a way we can loan phones out to people. That way they can still participate in telehealth services, which is something I really love. One of the things that our program has done too, we've figured out how to do that as well, because a lot of the folks that we have contact with might be homeless. And so it's really difficult when you meet someone in a crisis situation. We like to follow up. That's a big part of what we do. We do follow up and outreach to engage people in community supports. And if there's not a phone to be able to do so, it's a huge barrier. So we've got the ability to do some track phones now for people to be able to hand those out. That way we can follow up. We're able to, with some grant funding, do very limited, like short-term like hotel stay or something like that, to be able to connect them and engage somebody in treatment. Get case management so that we can try to figure out housing. It's one of the things I meant to touch on when I was talking about some of the school difficulties that I've noted is, and I think I saw an article about this, that there are significantly fewer CPS reports because minors aren't in school. And so fewer contacts with mandatory reporters. And that's something me and my team, we try to take into consideration and make a report anytime we see anything that could potentially be an issue, because there's fewer channels now to identify and funnel people who are in need. And so that's something I know we really have heightened awareness around. But I mean, it's been a hard year. I don't think there's any denying that. It's been a really hard year in a lot of different ways. And some of the things I've really appreciated, I've seen a lot of resilience too. I've seen people recognizing that, realizing, wow, I didn't think I could make it through this. And look at me, look where I'm at now. I'm making it through it. I've seen a lot of destigmatization, like trying to get rid of that stigma. I mean, it's a part of what we're doing here, right? Why all of you are here, and we're all talking together. Trying to help people realize that going through something hard is normal, and we all go through it in a different way. And a lot of adaptation, flexibility. I've seen it in a lot of different ways from clients, from employers. Better coordination with our community partners. I've had some really, really great coordination with Connections, Psychological Services Center at the Colorado State University. People just going above and beyond, working extra hours, going outside of their purview, really trying to come up with creative ways, new services to try to help meet people and get them taken care of in whatever way it might be. So I think that we're making a lot of changes. I think that conversations like this are invaluable to continue that dialogue, help to emphasize the needs that we are seeing, and to collaborate with all of our different community agencies. You know, I know I think I'm almost out of time. Am I correct? Okay, so I'll just leave with one story, something I really appreciated. We had a contact, and this is part of what we do. We really, I think that some of the best contacts I've had with law enforcement have been when we tag team together, because it can be restorative for folks who have had maybe some negative contacts with law enforcement in the past. And we had one with a gentleman really in a state of crisis, having really difficult thoughts of suicide. And we went and made contact with him. And he, during that course of the interaction, it was actually a couple-hour contact. During the course of that contact, he discussed trauma in the past with being arrested, and how that he was immediately defensive and on guard and scared because law enforcement were coming out. And he later told me that was restorative for him. He didn't realize that he could have that kind of an experience with law enforcement and with counseling, because he had negative interaction with counseling in the past too. I think we did like 6 weeks worth of outreach, worked really hard with, it was both Connections and Psychological Services Center to get him set up with services that were affordable too, as he didn't have Medicaid. It wasn't something we could help him with. And so that's one of my favorite stories. And I know the officer who was involved in that is something he talks about too. It's just, I absolutely love those kinds of interactions where it can help to change someone's perspective. I mean, that's what we're trying to do. I know one of the things that you asked about was about action items, things you can do. Keep doing this, normalize, destigmatize. If you have to have law enforcement contact, we're out there. Ask for a co-responder. Ask for a mental health unit on the call. That'll prompt dispatch, prompt law enforcement to reach out to us and get us involved sooner rather than later. Take mental health first aid courses. There's some that I know that are online still, so virtual. And refer to the crisis, the behavioral health urgent care, refer to the state hotlines. We'll make sure you all have that number and contact information. Yeah, keep the conversation going. I really appreciate y'all doing this tonight.
Great, thank you, Jesse. Great stories. I get caught up in just wanting to hear more and more stories. So, and I also know we've got some questions. I don't know if I see any. I see lots of thumbs up and hearts and all sorts of good things. I'm not sure right now I see any hand raises. Joyce, are you still monitoring chat? I don't know if I see Joyce. I see in the chat, again from Pat Berger, she's got a question, Jesse. She says, how long has your program been around? Any statistics on how much money you're saving the city or how many hours you're saving? And then also, does FOCO have a program like yours, or are they considering one?
Sure. Great questions. Thanks for asking. So our program, the co-responder program, it's the Larimer Interagency Network of Co-Responders. So we started out just, there was one person for a couple months before me, and that was about 5 years ago. And so I've been working through the Loveland Police Department for embedded out there through Summit Stone for about 5 years. And we've slowly branched out and grown into the larger team that we are today. Over that time, we collected tons of data, were able to apply successfully for grant funding, and partnered with the different law enforcement agencies to help as well. So slowly over the past couple of years, I'd say it's been about 4 years now for Larimer County Sheriff's Office branched out and had to. Estes Park was right around that exact same time. And Fort Collins does, it's actually through University of Colorado Health System. Now it's a community paramedic program. It's called CORE, C-O-R-E, and for the life of me, I can't remember what it stands for now. But it's C-O-R-E, and a woman named Stephanie Bucco used to work with Summit Stone, is out of that. Helps operate that program. And they do respond to law enforcement calls and have recently started, I believe they're going to be actually doing that primary response I talked about, embedding somebody with a law enforcement agency as well sometime soon. The stats, I'm data, I love data and stats. The money part is really, I don't know. The hours piece, let me see if I still have that website up. I'll try to pull it up. But we just changed over a new note system, documentation system. And as a part of that, we monitor and track, which is part of what our funding requires. We monitor and track the amount of time that officers have spent with us and how many times we're able to relieve that officer to go back into service. The really difficult part about capturing that type of data, we don't know how much time we're saving them. It's hard to gauge whether or not how long they would have been on a call for service with us if we weren't there. And so it's really hard to be able to actually quantify that, unfortunately. But we do have some information on how much time law enforcement is spending with us versus the amount of time that we are spending in total. And I'd say it's about the amount of time we're spending is about 6 times on average the amount of time that law enforcement is on that. So we're relieving them back into duty pretty significantly, if that helps.
That sounds significant to me. Yeah. Thank you. Anybody have a hand raise question? I'm scanning. I don't know if you see anything, Diana.
I don't see anything, but I had a question. From what I've read and heard in the news, I don't know, but they're saying that police officers are saying that they're often called in on calls that they really shouldn't be responding to. That it's just the usual fallback is to call a police officer to come in and try and deal with a situation when it really should be like someone like you coming in to work with people. Do you see that on a national level now, or are you too busy to pay attention to that?
Yeah, I mean, I do. So there was a first national co-responder conference last year, right before the lockdown. And so we went out there, and all the different models or all the different programs have such a variety of different models that are suited to their individual area, which is one of the things I found really, really interesting. But yeah, I would say one of the themes is that, and that's one of the reasons we're there, is that we're maybe better suited to be able to respond to some of those emotional behavioral health needs that do pop up from any law enforcement contact. Because it's not always someone's best day when they have contact with law enforcement. And so there is going to be a distress component there. And there are calls for things that are completely unrelated to criminal activity, things that are completely unrelated to something that law enforcement need to respond to, which is why I try to get involved as soon as possible. And why I was recommending you all to ask for a mental health unit if you recognize something. And I'll try to relieve the officers to head back out in what they're doing. That way I can provide that more catered sort of support for them. So yes, I do see that on both the local and the national level. And I think that's why these programs are really starting to flourish.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And if you all have any questions, please feel free to make sure contact information and such.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jesse. Great. Yeah, great program. Great information. So lucky we have it locally. So many people are like, we should do this. And it's like, we are doing it. So really great to hear what's going on. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. And our fourth panelist is Christine McHugh. Welcome, Christine. You could hear in her bio the sense of inspiration she personally brings from her own experience and the work she does. And would love to turn it over to you, Christine, for some perspective.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give two parts, how I kind of got to where I am and a little bit about the peer specialist program at Summit Stone. So I'll give you the definition of a peer specialist to start with. So a peer specialist is an individual with lived experience who has been trained to support those who struggle with mental health, substance use, or psychological traumas. These individuals can share the tools and the skills and the resources that have helped transform their lives at similar experiences. And they can provide them with the expertise that professional training cannot replicate. And I think that last part is just so key for me, because you can't teach what some of the hard knocks that people go through, but you can use your story to inspire others and inspire that change, and kind of just be there to say, hey, I've gone through this and I get what you're going through and I'm here for you to help you. So I am the supervisor of all the peers within our organization. I'm also a peer specialist first and foremost, and I will always be. That's something that's just so near and dear to my heart. And so within Summit Stone, we have 11 peers. So the peer program started in 2004 with a drop-in center, and it had 4 peer specialists that kind of ran a drop-in cafe and a one-on-ones. And then in 2019, they started expanding the peer program, hiring them for all different parts within the agency. Unfortunately, during the pandemic, we had to close our drop-in cafe because it couldn't work. There was not a way to make it work. So what we did do is we launched a bunch of virtual peer support groups. So we have 9 peer support groups that are all on a virtual platform. And those are pretty awesome. So they've been taking off. Some of them had slower starts than others, but as everything is on a virtual platform, it's hard to adjust. But we have an IOP aftercare, which I love this so much because our IOP is 9 hours a week. It's intensive outpatient. It's very good community, lots of hours a week. And then when it ends, it just ends for folks. They're just let go. And so they go from having 9 hours a week to nothing. So we launched a support group for people that have graduated the IOP that still want that kind of connection and community, so they can join that with a peer that has also been through it. We have a women's and a men's just general open support group. And I think those have both navigated to be pretty mature groups of people, and that's been going rather well. A practical and personal development group. So this is just like a life skills group, just talk about general life skills of life and recovery for any kind of wellness. And in this together, I love this group. So this is a group where they have a speaker, whether it's a peer specialist or somebody else or somebody from the community that wants to just share their journey with others. So it's kind of a speaker meeting, if you will, every time. We have a recovery play date. Myself and another peer run this group, and I love this, and I'm hoping that when COVID's over, we can take it off the virtual platform, but it's basically a mommy and me group. So we don't care if you have kids running in the background. That's kind of just the name of the game, is that we understand there's not always childcare and things. So bring your screaming babies. And that was something that we just didn't mind at all. So I'm hoping that, yeah, when we take it non-virtual, you can have your kids come to it, because that's just pretty vital for moms in recovery. So an LGBTQ plus support group. So I run this group, and I am part of the LGBTQ community. Me and my wife have been married for 5 years. So I'm pretty adamant about being support for that community. And then a family first group. So this is a group run by a peer that is pretty open about telling her journey with CHS or DHS and CPS, and how her kids were taken and she got them back. So this is just a platform for people that are going through the system, that they can find support. Hey, I've been there, what to expect with visitation or other things that they just might have concerns about. So those groups are subject to change, and we're going to be adding on to them and taking them away and moving them around as we kind of learn. But that was the basis of closing our drop-in cafe and starting something on a COVID-friendly platform. So yeah, like I said, we have 11 peers. So we have some outpatient peers that are based at our out of locations. They're all remote right now, but if a therapist or a clinician from one of those locations says that they have a client that could use an extra support in between their sessions, they can request a peer specialist, and our peer specialist will reach out to them and provide extra support. And then we have at our Murphy Center, Harvest Farms, our ACT, so which are our dual diagnosis, Mountain Crest, AIM and Wellness Corps, our new program, the Garcia House, and proud to let you know, Jesse, that we actually hired a co-responder peer today. So that is a new additive to the program. So we're just expanded and it's doing great. So some of the changes during COVID. So some of our outpatient peers have gone to the Zoom platforms as well. Like Jesse was explaining a little earlier with the loaner iPhone. So even being able to meet your peer specialist over those platforms with the loaner phone has been great for those people that don't have technology or have those barriers. So another reason we know that the numbers have gone up during COVID is that we have a wait list for the very first time. So I've actually had to create a wait list and decide what that was going to look like and how we are going to disperse after. So I've had for several months, I've had about 8 people on that wait list, 8 to 10 people at a time. And it's taken about, I would say, 2 weeks to get them moving off the wait list to get an outpatient peer specialist. So yeah, also, the change just to request to see our clients in their homes has changed. So we have to put in a request that goes to a COVID committee, and it's kind of just a different process than being able to just get up and go meet your clients as need be, because we have to have those, precautions for COVID. So yeah, that's a very just overview of the peer program. I love it. It's definitely near and dear to my heart. And then I guess I'll just give you a little bit about how I got passionate about being a peer specialist. So I came from a very broken home. My mother was an addict. I started using drugs at the age of 12. I was a needle user of meth for the better part of over 15 years. I went to the Department of Corrections. I spent 5 years there because of drugs. And I could not quit using. I didn't want to, I didn't have any desire to. I had done a ton of treatments and rehabs and nothing stuck. I did community corrections. I did the halfway house here in Larimer County 3 times, and I just had no desire. And then this last time, something just stuck. My wife and I went there at the same time. I just decided it was time. Even though I had done the same ERT program at Community Corrections 3 times, this last time it just stuck, and I was able to take the stuff out of it that I needed to stay clean. I lost my mom to her addiction in 2018. And that was like a real pivot moment for me to be like, I know that I can do this. In my most vulnerable hour, I was able to stay sober. So that was pretty awesome. I had started CAT classes for my addiction counselor while I was in Community Corrections. Didn't really know where I was going to go. I'm a multiple time felon. Everybody's like, you're not going to get anywhere. You're going to do those, waste the money, waste the time. You're not going to get anywhere. And I actually got my CAC 1 and my CAC 2, and now I'm a certified addictions they just changed it. So I guess I'm a certified addiction specialist. But I pushed really hard, and people, said that I wasn't going to be able to get in anywhere because of my background and those certain things. And I just kept pushing and didn't listen to any of it. I stumbled across a peer specialist posting with North Range Behavioral Health, and I didn't know what it was, but it said, if you have lived experience in mental health, substance use, and you want to help others, I was like, this is made for me. I didn't even know a peer specialist was a thing. So I applied and I got the job, and I worked in Greeley at almost all of their facilities that you could as a peer specialist, the detox, the ATU, the crisis center, the respite. So I don't think that I could replicate the experience that I got working at a crisis center in downtown Greeley. It is a different population of people, and it's very intense, and I really value my time there. And then I applied for this job, and I got here, and I love it. I love it so much because I'm an open book, and I'll tell anybody anything. And I think being able to guide where you've been and show my peer specialist the art of telling your story, and just how powerful it can be to use your story to inspire others and the change in other people. So yeah, that's why I'm just so passionate about this, and I love it. And I will forever be an advocate for the peer specialist because it is impactful. So yeah, well, I thank you guys for having me.
You've got such a great story and endless energy, Christine. Your energy is absolutely contagious.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. What questions do we have for Christine? I think, I see a couple hands, I think. I don't know, Diana, if you can help me out.
I'm looking.
I had my hand up. What kind of training do your peer specialists have?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we've devised a lot of in-house trainings that we get from mental health organizations that are peer specialist based from all over the country. So some of the peers are nationally certified, and that was something that we were going to do. And then we decided we'll let it be optional. So we definitely do a lot of in-house trainings and make sure that they know core competencies and boundaries and all of those sorts of things. So they definitely go through a 40 to 80 hour peer specialist training before they can be a peer specialist and start seeing clients of their own.
Wonderful. Thank you. What other questions?
This is Joyce. While we're looking for hands up, I just wanted to let everybody know, in case you haven't seen it, Jesse put the contact phone number for Summit Stone in the chat. So we're saving the chat, but do check that if you are interested in getting a hold of Summit Stone. We have wonderful resources we've been hearing about tonight.
Yes.
Yeah. Christine, is there a sobriety requirement is a certain number of years or for your people?
Yep. So we say 2 years should be the standard. So we would like it in active recovery for 2 years and done some sort of treatment to better yourself and just be the willingness to change and help others. So
Yeah, it's an awesome program. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I am curious, Christine, how do the peer specialists partner with the rest of the system, the other therapists and what have you?
Yeah, so it kind of just depends on where where they are within the system. So our outpatient peers really make a good wraparound support. So they're connecting with, you know, their med provider or their therapist or whoever they can on their treatment team, and really trying to get that wraparound care so that everybody knows what's going on. And especially because, you know, there is a higher need. So if you could only see your therapist every 2 weeks, but you need extra support, that peer specialist is really going to be looping in the therapist on the stuff they've been doing in between. So just having a wraparound care system and knowing that staying in communication is the biggest way to do it with people's treatment teams. So.
Wonderful. Thank you.
If I can chime in on that, I mean, one of the things that we work on, we assess for safety risk. And so part of that is our suicide assessments. And so if somebody meets criteria for zero suicide program, we refer over, and the peer specialists are amazing. They'll reach out and, like Christine's saying, do that extra contact, build that relationship with the person, which is the biggest factor for change, and really provide that extra help. So yeah, peer specialists have been awesome. I'm excited we got that we were able to hire one today.
Yeah, I totally skipped over that. Yeah. So on our folks that are on our zero suicide pathway, we do have a peer that does something called caring contacts. So once or twice a week, they will reach out to these people and just kind of assess for safety or talk to them, kind of just be that extra support as well. So that's something that's great. And then we just actually wrote a grant for 2 more positions, one for an LGBTQ specific peer and a Latinx specific peer. So these will be, peers that work with the specific communities that there's a real need for. So I know that I carry a caseload of a couple clients, and I have a Spanish speaking gentleman, and he doesn't want to do the language line or anything because he thinks that other people are in his business. So we get by with a little bit of Spanish that I know, but you know, it's a need because I feel like I fail him at times, you know, because there is that disconnect. So it's something that's very needed. And I'm very honored to be a part of this program that's grown so much, even since I've been here the last almost year or so.
That's amazing. I didn't realize that some of those grants were out there as well. Yeah, that is a huge need as well. One of the correspondents we just got with Larimer County Sheriff's Office is bilingual as well. I speak Spanish, but I don't consider myself fluent anymore. But it's a huge need out there as well.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you.
This is Joyce. We do have a comment from Cindy in the chat, and I think all of us are in this. Sue talked about all of you being healthcare heroes, and Cindy is saying, how do you take care of yourselves? You talked about the stress that you've been under, and obviously not just COVID, but just you have really challenging jobs. So how do you take care of yourselves? I guess that would be for all 4.
I can start us out. So this is something, it's just so important. So my wife and I inseminated, and we have a 1.5-year-old baby. So I don't know if that's considered self-care sometimes, but I would like to consider it self-care most of the time. And then for me this last year, we've also been building a house. So I think just watching the process of our first home that we're going to raise our baby in being built has been just truly self-care. I'll just drive out there and watch them work or whatever, be weird, but I love it. So yeah.
Love it. Thank you. How about you, Dr. Regali?
Man, I agree that sometimes kids can be that self-care because they don't really care what I've done during my day at work. It's like time to sit on mom's lap and read a book, or I want you to come paint with me. And so it really makes you be present in the moment. And I think also just learning a way to connect with others in a new way, like having Zoom game nights with friends. If you ever thought that, you know, the world would come to that, but just finding ways to connect, I think, was so important. Obviously, we go into this field because we like connecting with people. So finding a way to do that has been huge.
Wonderful. Thank you. How about you, Melita?
I need to do more of that. I have an 11-year-old boy, so he is not very cuddly anymore, but he will play Xbox with me. So we do that. And then I actually have really loved being home for a lot of reasons. I'm an introvert, contrary to popular belief. And I have been working on my plants and learning how to like take care of orchids, and repotting all of my plants and planting some, I started a worm compost. I'm getting really nerdy here, which is like so much fun. And then I'm gonna build a garden box for my patio, and that kind of stuff has helped me a lot because it's completely opposite of what I'm doing. So I get done with the day and I don't want to be on Zoom, and I don't want to talk to anyone, and I don't want to, you know, interact with humans. So cats and plants and the Xbox are how I take care of myself.
And yet you were willing to be here with us tonight. So thank you for that, for all of you. Yes, I know there's a lot of Zoom going on. How about you, Jesse?
I mirror a little bit of what everyone said. I definitely could use more. I see a therapist. I am also an introvert. I really need my time alone, and so I have open communication around that with my partner, and let her know kind of where I stand with that, and she's really respectful through that communication, so that helps. I met one of my goals that I've had for most of my life. I'm kind of a computer nerd, and I built a computer, so I did that, which was a huge goal, really fun. And also got into woodworking. I love working with my hands too. So
wonderful. Wow, that's a wide variety of perspectives and approaches for self-care, and such an important topic. Yeah, yeah. This has been amazing. I hope you all have been tracking some of the comments in the chat. There's a lot of appreciation for the vulnerability, the honesty, the incredible programs, and really the incredible work you do. So yeah, if we can, let's give it up for our presenters. It's been a wonderful presentation and discussion, and I know I've personally learned a whole bunch. And it's really important to us that we make sure that this time we spend together is valuable, and it's also helpful. You know, we've been together for almost 2 hours now, and so to just take a moment and reflect and think, what's been your biggest takeaway from our time together? And so would love it if people, if you want to come off mute and share over the line, please do, or please enter your thoughts in chat. What's one of your key takeaways from our time together? One thing I'll share for myself as it's incredible to me what we have in Northern Colorado. And as I listen to all of you, you all know each other, you're making cross referrals, you're agile. I feel so fortunate that our community is as innovative and progressive as we are, and a lot of great collaborations going on. So that's one thing that really stood up for me tonight, and appreciate all your personal stories. Who else would like to share? I'd love to hear from at least a couple people. Got a lot of great programs. Kathy says she appreciates knowing about the wide range of services. Yep. Yeah. Oh, Bill, sorry. Thank you. Yeah.
You know, we can't do everything, but we can do something. And one of our speakers reminded me of something I can do. You know, my money can go farther than my feet in terms of COVID-19. And, you know, we're going to get a stimulus check. We don't need it. So there's going to be an organization, at least one organization in Fort Collins that's going to get at least part of that stimulus check, because I don't need it, and it'll do more good.
I hear a challenge from Bill. Who else is going to join Bill in his donation?
I can't do a matching with all of you, but
yeah, right. Yeah, people like that suggestion. As Michael Allen said, he's part of the inspiration. He's the Summit Stone CEO that's with us tonight. Says behavioral healthcare workers are healthcare heroes. Absolutely. And Beth, I see your hand up.
Yeah, just kind of echoing a little bit of what you said, Sue, about it was so nice to hear how they're all working together. And I always like the silver lining idea because, you think of how bad it's been this last year and into this year, but it's so great to hear how all these different agencies and organizations are working together, even more so now than they were before. And I just think that is so inspiring to see how that's all coming together to help, especially our most impacted communities that already had so many problems. And now, even more, but now they have even more people working together to help them. So it's just so inspiring. So thank you all for providing that inspiration tonight.
Well said. Thank you, Beth.
Joyce, did you see that there's something in the chat? Question
Missed it. Okay.
from Ann?
Okay. There does seem, Ann McGinnis is saying the presenters were terrific. However, there does seem to be a shortage of psychological counselors. There has also been a voter-approved tax to support behavioral health. Do any of you have suggestions as to how the treatment personnel could be increased? Interesting.
And an opportunity to do it in 32 seconds if we're
Yeah,
going
right.
I would say that one big thing is reducing stigma. And the more we can normalize going to therapy, talking about what's going on for us and supporting our neighbors, our family members, and our friends, I think that that's going to encourage folks to go into the field.
Excellent. Excellent. Well said. Thank you. Well, thank you all for being here tonight. I appreciate the panelists for spending your time with us. Very much appreciate all the people and your questions and spending your evenings talking about this topic that doesn't get enough attention. So appreciate you all being here, and we'll look forward to seeing you at future gatherings and more discussions on this topic.
Thank you
so much. That was just
That
excellent.
was wonderful.
Great.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
That's great. Enjoy the rest of the evening.